The old farmhouse had been empty for more than 20 years. Everyone in the small town knew the place was cursed, but no one dared to say it out loud. People whispered about strange noises, flickering lights, and shadows moving through the broken windows, even though no one had lived there in decades. One night, 3 teenagers, Ethan, Maria, and Luke, decided to test the stories. They told themselves it was only for fun, only to prove to their friends that they were brave. They said they would stay inside the house for just 1 hour, record everything on their phones, and come back with proof that there was nothing to fear. As they reached the edge of the property, the air grew strangely cold. The tall grass around the fence swayed, even though there was no wind. Luke laughed nervously, kicking at the rusted gate. It creaked open with a sound like metal screaming, and for a moment, all 3 froze. Maria whispered that maybe they should turn back, but Ethan, trying to act fearless, pushed forward. The front porch sagged under their weight, the wood groaning as if the house itself hated being disturbed. They stepped inside, their flashlights cutting through the thick dust in the air. The smell of mold and something rotten made Maria cover her mouth. The wallpaper was peeling, the ceiling sagged, and the floor was littered with broken glass. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Just an old abandoned house. They laughed, teased each other, and tried to make jokes to hide their fear. But then, Maria noticed something strange. On the wall near the staircase, words were carved into the plaster. They looked fresh, as if someone had scratched them in just hours ago. The letters spelled, "You should not be here." Her voice shook as she called the others over. Ethan tried to dismiss it as graffiti, but his hand trembled when he touched the grooves. The marks were too deep, too clean, almost like claws had made them. They moved deeper into the house. Every step seemed louder than the last. Somewhere above them, floorboards creaked, even though no one else was supposed to be there. Luke whispered that maybe a homeless person was living upstairs, but Ethan shook his head. The sound was too heavy, too slow, like someone dragging their feet instead of walking. They reached the kitchen, and their flashlights reflected off something shiny on the floor. A knife lay in the dust, its blade rusted dark. Next to it was a single shoe, small, like it belonged to a child. Maria refused to touch it, but Luke bent down, picking it up with shaking fingers. The shoe was wet. Not with water, but with something thick and dark that smelled like iron. That was when the sound came. A loud slam, as if every door in the house had shut at the same time. Their flashlights flickered, plunging them into near darkness for a few seconds. Maria screamed, her light dancing across the wall, and for just an instant, she saw a figure at the end of the hall. Tall, thin, with arms too long for its body. When the light steadied again, the hallway was empty. Ethan grabbed the others, whispering that they had to leave. But the way back to the door seemed longer now, the walls closer, the air heavier. Each corner they turned looked the same as the last. The old farmhouse felt alive, shifting around them. Suddenly, a voice echoed from upstairs. It was soft, almost like a child's calling, "Help me. Please." Maria froze, whispering that it sounded like a little girl. Against all reason, Ethan wanted to check. He said maybe someone was really trapped there, maybe a runaway or a lost child. Against their fear, guilt pushed them to climb the stairs. Every step groaned under their weight. The second floor was darker, colder. Their lights shook as they scanned the hallway. Doors lined both sides, but most were broken, hanging open. At the far end, one door was closed. The voice came again, a whisper. "Please. Help me." They pushed the door open. Inside was a small bedroom. Toys were scattered across the floor, covered in dust. A rocking chair sat in the corner, moving slowly back and forth, though no one was touching it. On the bed lay a doll. Its face cracked, one glass eye missing. Maria gasped as she realized the doll was wearing the other shoe. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind them. The rocking chair stopped. The doll's head turned toward them on its own, and a whisper filled the room, not from one voice, but from many. "You should not be here." The lights died. The screams filled the dark. The night was calm in the countryside, but Daniel could not shake the feeling that something was watching him. He had parked his car near the edge of the woods because he wanted to explore the old hunting cabin his grandfather had once mentioned. The cabin had been abandoned for years, and locals claimed hunters who stepped inside never came back. Daniel laughed at the stories. He told himself it was just old country gossip, nothing more. With a flashlight in his hand and a small camera around his neck, he crossed the wooden fence and entered the forest. The deeper he walked, the quieter everything became. No crickets, no wind, no owls, just silence. The dirt path was narrow and winding, and each step echoed too loudly in his ears. After nearly 20 minutes, he saw the shape of the cabin. It was smaller than he imagined. The roof sagged, moss covered the walls, and the windows were shattered. Yet the front door stood upright, as if it had been replaced not too long ago. Daniel frowned. He remembered hearing the place had been untouched for decades. He pushed the door. It swung open slowly, revealing the cabin's dark interior. A smell of damp wood and something sour filled the air. Dust floated like ash in the beam of his flashlight. The wooden floor creaked as he stepped inside. The cabin was one room, with a fireplace at the far end. Old furniture was broken and scattered. A single table stood in the center, covered in claw marks. On the wall, above the fireplace, hung a deer skull, its hollow eyes staring down at him. Daniel lifted his camera and began recording, speaking in a low voice as if making a documentary. He joked nervously, saying maybe he would find treasure or bones, but then he noticed something odd. The ashes in the fireplace were still warm. He knelt down, touching them. Someone had been here not long ago. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind him. He jumped, spinning around, but no one was there. He tried to laugh it off, saying the wind had done it, but the air was completely still. His flashlight flickered, and for a moment, he thought he saw a shadow pass across the wall. Then came the sound, a slow, heavy breathing, not his own. It came from the corner of the room, deep and guttural, like something trying to hide but failing. Daniel whispered, asking if someone was there. His voice cracked. The breathing stopped. The silence was worse. He took a shaky step back, shining his light into the corner. Nothing, only darkness. He turned to leave, but the door would not budge. He pushed, pulled, slammed his shoulder against it, but it was like the wood had turned to stone. His flashlight shook in his hand. That was when he noticed the deer skull. It was no longer on the wall. It was on the table. The antlers seemed sharper now, and the hollow eye sockets looked deeper. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He swore it was staring at him. He backed away, whispering to himself that it was just his imagination. But then slowly, the skull began to move. It tilted its head. The jaw opened wide, far wider than any animal's mouth should. From inside the skull came the same heavy breathing he had heard before. Daniel screamed, dropping his flashlight. The cabin plunged into darkness. He scrambled across the floor, his hands finding broken wood and cold stone. Somewhere in the dark, claws scraped against the table. The breathing grew louder, closer. He finally found his flashlight and turned it on. The beam cut through the dark and revealed dozens of skulls hanging from the ceiling, swinging slightly, as if disturbed by some unseen hand. Human skulls, animal skulls, all with their jaws wide open. The deer skull was gone. A voice whispered from behind him, so close it brushed his ear. "Trespasser." The flashlight went out again. Outside in the forest, some hikers passing by later that night swore they heard screams. But when the sheriff checked the cabin the next morning, it was empty. No sign of Daniel. Only his camera was found on the Floor, still recording, its final seconds filled with the sound of heavy breathing. Clara and her cousin David had always been curious about the old hospital on the edge of town. It had been shut down after a fire 25 years ago, and the townspeople said the building was haunted by the patients who had died inside. During the day, the hospital looked harmless, just a crumbling structure of broken glass and graffiti. But at night, it seemed alive. The windows looked like black eyes watching. The hallways echoed with strange sounds, even though no one had been inside for years. Clara wanted proof. She convinced David to go with her one Friday night. They carried flashlights, and David brought along an old camcorder, laughing nervously as he said they'd make their own ghost video. The hospital gates were locked, but the fence was easy to climb. Inside, the air smelled like smoke and mold. The building loomed above them, its roof sagging, its walls cracked. When they pushed the front doors open, they groaned like something was waking up. The lobby was full of broken furniture, shattered glass, and dark stains on the floor. Clara shined her light across the walls. The paint was burned black, and strange symbols had been drawn in red over the scorch marks. At first, it was almost exciting. They wandered through the dark hallways, their lights reflecting off broken gurneys and rusted wheelchairs. The sound of dripping water echoed around them, though neither could see where it came from. But soon, they noticed something odd. Every hallway they walked down seemed to lead them back to the same place, the children's ward. The doors of the rooms were open, and the small beds inside were overturned. On one of the walls, words were written in ash, "No escape." David tried to laugh, but his voice cracked. He said someone must have painted it as a prank. But Clara pointed out that the ash was still fresh. When she touched it, her fingers came away black. They pushed further into the ward, and that was when they heard it. A faint sound like someone humming. A soft, broken lullaby drifting through the dark. Clara froze, her heart racing. David whispered that maybe another explorer was inside, but Clara shook her head. The sound was too low, too hollow. It didn't sound human. The humming grew louder as they walked. At the end of the hall was a room with its door half burned away. Inside, they found a rocking chair, still intact, moving slowly back and forth. On the chair sat a nurse's uniform, perfectly folded, though the fabric was burned black around the edges. The lullaby was louder now, filling the room, though no one was singing. Suddenly, the camcorder in David's hands turned on by itself. The screen glowed, showing not their faces but the image of the same room they were standing in. Except in the recording, the chair was not empty. A nurse sat there, her skin pale, her face covered by a mask of cracked porcelain. She rocked back and forth, holding a burned child's doll in her arms. Clara screamed and dropped her flashlight. The beam rolled across the floor, landing on the empty chair. But for just a second, she saw someone sitting there. A tall figure, in white, staring at her. David tried to run, pulling Clara toward the hall, but the door slammed shut in front of them. The humming turned into whispers, dozens of voices at once, surrounding them. The camcorder slipped from David's hands, landing on the floor. The screen still glowed, showing the nurse standing up from her chair, turning toward the lens, her porcelain mask cracking open into a wide, jagged smile. The lights flickered. Clara screamed as something icy grabbed her wrist. David shouted her name, pulling, but the grip was too strong. In the last moment, before the flashlight died completely, Clara swore she saw dozens of burned children standing in the room, their hollow eyes watching her. When the light returned, David was alone. The rocking chair was still moving, and the folded uniform was gone. Later, police found David outside the hospital, shaking and crying. He could not explain what happened to Clara. He only kept repeating one thing: she shouldn't have gone in the children's ward. Miles was a truck driver who often passed lonely highways at night. One evening, his route took him through an old stretch of road no one used anymore. Locals called it Dead Man's Crossing because decades ago, a train derailed nearby, killing dozens of passengers. The rail yard had been abandoned since then. The tracks left to rust in silence. When his truck's fuel gauge dipped low, Miles decided to pull over and check his map. He saw the dark outline of the rail yard just ahead. Hoping to find a place to rest, he parked by the broken gate and stepped out with his flashlight. The moment his boots touched the ground, he felt it, the strange weight in the air, heavy and wrong. The rail yard stretched before him like a graveyard. Rusted trains sat in rows, their windows black, their doors hanging open like mouths. He told himself it would only take a few minutes. Maybe he'd find a bench, maybe even an office with a chair. He pushed deeper into the yard, weaving between the train cars. The silence was thick, broken only by the sound of his own footsteps. One of the train cars caught his attention. Its metal door was wide open, and faint light flickered inside. It didn't make sense, there was no electricity here. Yet when he climbed up the steps and entered, he saw lanterns glowing faintly, as though someone had lit them minutes ago. The seats were torn and burned, but he felt eyes on him. He turned his light across the car and froze. Every seat was filled with shadowy figures. Pale faces, blank eyes, all staring forward as if waiting for a journey that would never come. Miles stumbled back, whispering that it wasn't real, but then one of the figures turned its head. Its skin was gray, stretched tight, and its mouth opened wide with a low groan that echoed through the car. The lanterns flickered. The air grew colder. And slowly, all the figures began to rise. Miles bolted, running down the aisle, but when he looked back, he saw them following. Not walking, but gliding, their movements jerky, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. He leapt out of the car and sprinted across the yard. His breath came in ragged gasps, his flashlight beam bouncing wildly. The shadows moved along the trains, some slipping between the cars, others crawling along the roofs like insects. He reached another train car, slamming the doors shut behind him. His flashlight revealed cracked glass and rusted rails inside. He pressed his back to the door, trying to calm his breath. Then he heard it, the sound of a train whistle, low and distant, though no train had run on those tracks for decades. Car began to shake, the wheels screeching against the rusted rails. Dust fell from the ceiling as the car lurched forward, moving on tracks that should have been dead. Through the broken windows, Miles saw the other trains begin to move too. Their dark shapes glided across the yard, lights glowing faintly in the cabins. Shadows filled the windows, passengers staring out at him with lifeless eyes. He pounded on the door, screaming, but the car moved faster, dragging him deeper into the yard. The whistle blew again, long and mournful. The last thing he remembered was looking out the window and seeing a wall of fire rushing toward the train. Just like the old derailment dot when Miles's truck was found the next morning, it was still. Parked by the broken gate, the driver's seat was empty. No trace of him was ever found. But sometimes, truckers passing the road late at night claim they hear the whistle of a ghost train echoing in the dark. And if they look closely, they see a pale face staring from the window of a passing car. The farmhouse, the cabin, the hospital, the rail yard. 4 places far apart, yet each carried the same warning for those who dared to enter. You should not be here. It was easy to dismiss the stories as local myths. Teenagers who vanished, travelers who never came home, explorers who left broken and scarred. People said it was bad luck, or coincidence, or just the imagination of frightened minds. But when the reports were placed side by side, the similarities were impossible to ignore. A sheriff in the farmhouses town once told a reporter that he found claw marks across the walls inside. He swore the marks were the same as those discovered later in the burned hospital's children's ward. No one believed him, but the photos he kept locked in his desk showed long, sharp grooves etched deep into plaster and stone. The abandoned cabin where Daniel disappeared was investigated by state rangers. They never spoke of what they saw inside. But one of them quit his job the next day. His only words before leaving were, "The skulls." They were still breathing. At the rail yard, truckers began reporting strange lights long before Miles vanished. Some even captured faint whistles on their dash cameras. The sound always came at midnight, followed by distorted voices whispering just beneath the static. Different towns, different years, different people. Yet all trespassers described the same feeling: being watched, being hunted, being swallowed by something they couldn't name. A retired journalist tried to piece the stories together once. He called it the Trespassers' Curse. He believed that these places were not random, but linked by something older, something that lingered wherever blood had been spilled unjustly. He wrote that the land itself had grown hungry, and anyone who stepped where they shouldn't was offering themselves as a sacrifice. He never finished his work. His typewriter was found abandoned in his office, a half-written page still in the machine. The words stopped mid-sentence. They're already inside the house. No one ever saw him again, but people kept trespassing. Some out of curiosity, some out of arrogance, some out of pure chance. And the curse waited for each of them. Years passed, but the stories never stopped. Each town had its own warnings, its own cursed place where the air grew heavy and whispers filled the dark. Most people avoided them. Most people knew better, but one man didn't. His name was Jared, a filmmaker who hunted for forgotten legends. He had heard the stories about the farmhouse, the cabin, the hospital, and the rail yard, and he believed they were connected. Determined to prove it, he packed his camera and maps, and he set out to visit every location in a single trip. His plan was simple: record the evidence, cut it into a documentary, and show the world that the Trespassers' Curse was nothing but myth. The farmhouse was his first stop. He walked through its sagging doors, whispering to his camera about teenagers who vanished years ago. Dust clung to his boots as he entered the kitchen, where he found a rusted knife lying in the exact spot the sheriff's report had once described. He laughed nervously, brushing it off as coincidence. Next came the hunting cabin. Jared climbed the steps, filming the claw marks on the table, filming the empty hooks on the walls where skulls were said to hang. His flashlight flickered, and for a brief second, he thought he saw something in the shadows, a tall shape with antlers. But when the light steadied, the room was empty. At the hospital, he found the burned children's ward. His camera caught the peeling paint, the overturned beds, the rocking chair in the corner. The air smelled like ash. He tried to speak into the microphone, but his throat was dry. And then the camcorder glitched, just for a moment, showing a nurse in the chair, staring at him through a mask of cracked porcelain. By the time he reached the rail yard, Jared's hands were shaking. He climbed into one of the cars, pointing his camera at the empty seats. He whispered about Miles, the driver who vanished here. That was when he noticed something he hadn't seen before. Each seat bore a carving, scratched deep into the metal. 4 words repeated over and over, seat after seat, row after row. You should not be here. The lanterns flickered to life. Jared spun around, but every seat was filled now. Pale faces stared back at him, blank eyes unblinking. He stumbled to the door, but it slammed shut. The whistle blew, low and long, and the car shuddered. His camera fell to the floor. It kept recording as his flashlight spun, capturing fragments, the figures rising from their seats, the windows glowing with fire, the aisle stretching longer than it should. In the final seconds of the tape, Jared's voice could be heard, panicked and broken. It's the same thing. It was never 4 places. It was always one. It follows wherever we go. The screen went black. Weeks later, Jared's car was found abandoned on the roadside, his maps scattered across the passenger seat. The footage surfaced only once, posted briefly on an obscure video forum before it was taken down. Some say the file was cursed, that anyone who watched it felt a presence in their home afterward. Now, the stories continue. New names, new towns, always the same fate, and the same whisper, heard in the dark by anyone who dares to trespass. You should not be here.